The Russo-Japanese War, that is, the war fought between Japan and Russia in the early 20th century. Last time, the Allied fleet almost destroyed the Russian fleet at Port Arthur, which was holed up in Port Lushun, in the Battle of the Yellow Sea. However, they believed that the Russian fleet was still in Port Lushun, protected by Fort Arthur, and they needed to prepare for it. For this reason, the Navy requested the Army to attack Fortress Lushun, and the Third Army led by General Nogi was assigned to capture it. Although it was decided to attack the fortress, the leaders did not originally intend to attack the fortress, and little information had been gathered about it. The military leadership was also unaware of the existence of the solid fortifications built by Russia. In addition, Nogi had taken the Qing fortress of Lushun in one day during the Sino-Japanese War 10 years earlier. The army leaders were optimistic that Nogi would easily capture the fortress of Port Arthur this time as well. General Nogi arrived in Lushun at the end of June and was amazed at the solid Russian fortifications at Lushun Fortress. Nogi requested the army leaders in Japan to give him as many shells as possible. On August 19, 1904, the Third Army, with a total of 51,000 men and 380 guns, made the first general attack. The Russo-Japanese War was the first battle in which machine guns were equipped for the first time. Against the solid fortifications equipped with machine guns and artillery, the Japanese forces challenged them with infantry assaults. What was the result? It was a cruel defeat. The Japanese forces charged into the fortress where machine guns were waiting for them, knocking down soldiers one after another. The Japanese also had machine guns, but they were only intended to be used as an offensive aid. The Russians, however, used machine guns defensively by stationing them in defensive positions. As a result, the Third Army suffered unprecedented losses of 5,017 dead and 10,870 wounded out of 5,100 men. The Japanese forces failed to apply any of the lessons learned in the Battle of Nanzan. In contrast, the Russians suffered 1,500 dead and 4,500 wounded. Instead of an infantry assault, Nogi switched the next battle to a strategy of digging trenches to secure a path of advance and then attacking with ample artillery support. In addition, a 28 cm howitzer, an anti-ship attack gun, was ordered from Japan and used. This gun was so huge that it had to be used with a concrete turret due to its shelling vibration. The first general attack was ordered by the Imperial General Headquarters to attack early, and after reflecting on the failure to secure sufficient artillery ammunition, this time the attack was carried out with sufficient ammunition ready. On September 19, a second general attack was made. The target was the enemy redoubt in front of the fortress. The attack was supported by artillery, but again met with stubborn resistance from the Russians and ended in failure. In this battle, 924 were killed and 3,925 were wounded. From October 2 to 6, the Japanese again attacked the enemy redoubts and captured the Songjusan redoubt. This time, they also took the tactic of digging through the tunnels and then falling into the enemy lines from there. However, as a result, they only captured several redoubts. This October attack left 1,029 dead and 2,782 people were killed. Thus, the second general strike also ended in failure. By the way, the most famous Japanese novel depicting the Russo-Japanese War is Sakano Yui no Kumo, Clouds Over the Hill, by Ryotaro Shiba. In this novel, Shiba wrote about Nogi as an incompetent general. However, at that time, there was no such thing as a modern fortification strategy equipped with machine guns, and the situation was truly exploratory. Even the best generals of the time could not have taken the Lushun fortress without sacrificing their lives. The failure of these two general attacks deeply disappointed the navy that had been commissioned to capture Lushun fortress. They wanted to annihilate the fleet as soon as possible before the upcoming confrontation with the Baltic Fleet. Therefore, the Navy asked the Army to seize the 203rd Highland, from which it could overlook Port Lushun and destroy the enemy fleet with shells, rather than capture Lushun fortress. The Imperial Japanese Army also gave up the idea of capturing the fortress because of the heavy casualties, and asked the Manchurian army to take the Navy's opinion into consideration. However, the Manchu forces in the field were adamant about capturing Fortress Lushun. The Manchu forces were of the view that they had captured several enemy redoubts and that in a short time the fortress of Lushun would fall. The Imperial Japanese Army, in a panic, decided to invade the 203rd Plateau at an imperial conference attended by the Emperor of Japan. However, General Oyama of the Manchurian Army refused. This disagreement between the Imperial Japanese Army and the Manchurian Army embarrassed Nogi and the Third Army. Thus, a third general attack was to take place. The Imperial General Headquarters will commit the reserve active divisions that exist in Japan to the Third Army in preparation for this attack. This left Japan with no reserve forces that could withstand immediate combat on active duty. Nogi had the entrenchments built in advance and decided to launch a third general attack on November 26. The tactic remained the same as before, an assault on the enemy redoubt, with artillery covering the assault. With heavy casualties from Russian snipers, they stormed the redoubt and engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand combat, but failed to seize the redoubt and retreated. On the night of the 26th, Nogi organized a special unit for this general attack. It was the White Hakama team. It was a night attack force with a total of 3,000 men. To make it easier to distinguish them from the enemy, they all wore a white hakama. The White Hakama unit began its assault at 9 p.m. There was a barbed wire fence in front of the enemy position, and bullets hit them while they were cutting through it. And when they broke through the barbed wire, a minefield awaited them. The White Hakama unit pushed through the minefield and fought bravely despite losing most of its men. At 2 a.m., Major General Nakamura, who was in command, was wounded, and the unit decided that it would be impossible to seize the redoubt and retreated. In fact, the Russians were down to only a dozen or so men defending the redoubt, and it looked as if it would fall with just one more push. The Russian records also praise with amazement the bravery of the White Hakama unit, who charged into the minefields and fought in spite of them. The White Hakama unit, which had been the mainstay of the attack, failed to seize the redoubt, and the third general attack also resulted in more than 7,000 casualties. At this point, Nogi gave up on the capture of the fortress of Lushun and decided to attack the 203rd Highlands. It was a decision that went against the orders of the Manchurian Army, the upper organization. On November 27, Nogi began bombarding the 203rd Highlands with all guns, including 28-cm howitzers. After confirming the destruction of the Russian positions by artillery fire, they launched an infantry assault, and on the 28th, they took control of the summit of the 203rd Highland. However, the Russian counterattack was also fierce, and the summit was soon retaken. 29th, the field commander reported that there were not enough troops to conquer the 203rd Highlands with the current forces. Nogi therefore decided to use the remaining reserve force, the reserve corps sent by the Imperial Headquarters. On the 30th, with the existing troops and a reserve division, the unit made a raid into the 203rd Highlands. Despite fierce resistance from the Russians, they conquered the summit of the 203rd Highland, but were again reoccupied by the Russians. At this time, General Nogi's second son was killed in battle. At the time, Nogi is said to have said of his second son's death, "He died well, and now I feel sorry for him to the world." Nogi's eldest son was also killed in the Battle of Nanzan, and the Japanese public showed great sympathy for Nogi. Let me return to the story a little here. Upon hearing the news that the third general attack on the fortress of Lushun had failed, the leaders of the Manchurian army were in the mood that it would be impossible for Nogi to capture Lushun. Kodama, the chief of general staff, decides to go and command the Third Army himself. This was a great disgrace to Nogi, and he could pay for this shame with death. Kodama and Nogi were old acquaintances from the Choshu domain at the end of the Edo period. Oyama, the commander-in-chief of the Manchurian army, believed that Kodama would be able to handle the situation without hurting Nogi's self-esteem. On December 1, Kodama arrived in Lushun and told Nogi that he wanted him to hand over command. Kodama moved the guns further forward and shifted the position. On December 4, The attack on the 203rd Highland was launched. By December 5, the Third Army had taken control of the majority of the redoubts on the 203rd Highlands, and by 2200 hours the Russians began to withdraw, and the Third Army succeeded in taking the 203rd Highlands. From the 203rd high point, he could see the entirety of Lushun Bay, and from there Kodama bombarded the Russian fleet. As a result, he succeeded in destroying all the Russian battleships in Lushun Bay, thus meeting the Navy's request. The invasion of the fortress of Lushun was to continue from then on. On December 10, Major General Kondrachenko, a trusted advisor to Lieutenant General Stessel, Commander-in-Chief of the Brigadier General's fortress, was killed in action. Kodama's strategy was to completely destroy enemy breastworks and trenches with artillery fire, followed by an infantry assault. Thus, in 2 weeks, Kodama dropped the main redoubts in the northeastern sector. The Russian forces were greatly reduced in strength during the siege of the 203rd Highlands. Nevertheless, the soldiers had not yet lost their will to fight. But the commander-in-chief of the fortress, Lieutenant General Stessel, decided to surrender after the death of his trusted Major General Kondrachenko and the loss of the redoubts in the northeastern direction. He notified the Third Army of his surrender on January 1, 1905. On January 5, Nogi met with Stessel at Suishaye. Nogi allowed the surrendered Russian generals to take the sword and protected their honor. The Russian military leaders seemed to be of the opinion that the fortress fell due to the success of the artillery rather than the infantry, and while they praised the good work of the artillery at this Water Division press conference, they did not comment specifically on the infantry. How Kodama influenced the Third Army is still debated. Within 4 days of Kodama's arrival, the 203rd Highlands had fallen. This was more to Nogi's credit, as the Russians had been considerably reduced in strength by the attack from the 29th. It is believed that the 203rd Highlands could have been conquered even without Kodama. However, Kodama skillfully used artillery during the subsequent capture of Fortress Lushun, which seems to differ from Nogi's military tactics. At any rate, Lushun fell. This allowed Nogi to join the battle against the Russian forces in the north, and Japan would fight a do-or-die battle with Russia. I will explain that in the next commentary. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and click the like button.